14 in Madras, and at a very young age, she decided to become a doctor, even though she was not very much interested in studying science or mathematics. But because she felt that as a doctor, she could in a very direct way, serve the people and the common people, she decided to study science and get admission in the medical college. So then she joined the Medical College of Madras, and she graduated from there at the time when the Second World War had started, and the British government wanted all the doctors to work for them and to treat their soldiers, wounded and sick soldiers. But Lakshmi did not want to work for the British, and so she left India and she went to Singapore, where her cousin and his wife were staying, and she started practicing medicine in Singapore. She was a gynecologist, and very soon she became very popular, and she had a very huge practice, which was mostly among the migrants. They were Indian migrants whose great grandparents and grandparents had migrated from South India to Burma, Malaysia, and Singapore, and they were working there as plantation workers and also as clerks in offices and also in the factories. So they were not rich people, they were poor people and lower middle class people. And Lakshmi, since she was willing to see them and treat them for very little money, and 24 hours of the day her clinic was open for them, she became very popular and had a very big practice very soon. It was at this point in 1942, as you all know, that the British Army in Singapore surrendered to the Japanese. Now, this was a very big historical event, and it was impossible for the British to even accept that such a thing could happen, but they did have to surrender. And after the surrender, the British officers told the Indian officers and the Indian Jawans that now they were free of their oath to the King of England, and they were now under the control of the Japanese, and they should do whatever the Japanese told them to do. So the Indian soldiers and the officers were very upset by the behavior, arrogant behavior of the Britishers, and they were at a loss as to what they should do. It was at this point that the Japanese suggested to the Indian officers that they would be happy to start a army of liberation for the freedom of India, and they would help in every way if the Indian officers and their men were willing to join such an army. So they had many discussions, and at this time, actually, some of them came in contact with Lakshmi also, since she was an Indian doctor there, and they needed medicines, they needed supplies for the wounded soldiers. So she was also very interested in this whole project, and she was very enthusiastic. Anyway, so she knew all about the discussions that were going on. And Prem Sehgal was one of the young Punjabi Indian Army officers who played a very important role in convincing many of his seniors to actually join this Army of Liberation. And one of them, of course, a very important one, was General Shanawaz. And the Indian National Army was formed, but there were a lot of problems at that time because General Mohan Singh, he had some conflicts with the Japanese, and when Raj Bihari Bose ji came from Japan, he was quite an old man. He had been out of touch with India, and he did not command that kind of respect among the INA people. But he did one very great thing, that is that he felt that this movement needed to be carried further, and he felt that the only person who could give the INA the leadership that it needed was Subhas Chandra Bose. Now, as you know, after being arrested in the Quit India movement, Netaji was able to escape from India, from his home, from Bengal, and after a very hazardous journey, he actually reached Germany. And in Germany, he was uh, trying to form exactly such an army there with the prisoners of war of the British army captured by the German army who were Indians. And he tried to meet them. He met some of them in the jail. But at that time, Hitler was determined to attack the Soviet Union. In fact, Netaji had a conversation with Hitler in which he advised him that, don't do this because remember, even Napoleon could not bring his army out of Russia, and now the Soviet Union is much stronger. They will fight to the last man. They are very patriotic people, and it will not be correct for you to attack them. But Hitler was determined, and we know what his politics were. He was a fascist. He was totally anti-communist. He wanted to destroy the Soviet Union, so he went ahead, and so it was not possible for the Germans to help Netaji at that time. It was in this situation that the Japanese contacted Netaji in Germany and made arrangements for him to leave in a submarine at the height of the sea war. I mean, it was a very, very dangerous thing to do. But Netaji came in that submarine from Europe to and it's very interesting. He was accompanied by a very young Indian student from Hyderabad who was studying German in Germany and became Netaji's secretary. His name was Abid Hussain. And in the course of the journey, Netaji said, Abid, every country has got a slogan. So we should have a slogan also because we want to be meeting the Japanese on an equal footing. So Abid said, well, let me think about it, sir. And then he came up with the slogan of Jai Hind, which we use even today in India. We should remember that the person who actually um, what should I say, formulated this slogan was Abid Hussain from Hyderabad, who was Netaji's secretary. And anyway, then they arrived in Tokyo, and then from Tokyo they came in a small plane to Singapore. And in Singapore, Netaji was welcomed by 4 people. 3 people belonged to the India Independence League in Singapore. That was like a sort of an organization which was helpful to the Congress and the national movement of India. And Lakshmi also was one of the 4 people. And Netaji was happy to meet her because, of course, he knew her mother, who was a very prominent congresswoman and freedom fighter, Srimati Ammu Swaminathan. After that, Netaji went and addressed the soldiers, and he made that famous speech, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga." If you give me your blood, I will promise you freedom. And of course, this infused the soldiers, and they felt very proud, and they felt very encouraged, and they were sure that now they would really be able to fight for India's independence. After that, Netaji came in the evening to meet the India Independence League people, and he said that he was determined to have a women's regiment also. So they thought this was a completely mad idea, and they said, "Oh no, such a thing is not possible, and where will we find women?" Whenever women are being given a post or their responsibilities are being increased, people say, "Oh, where will we find women? Women are not capable of doing this," when actually women are capable of doing everything. They just need to be given the opportunity. So Netaji said, "No, I am determined to do this because I know that Indian women will fight, and they will fight not only for the freedom of India, but for their own freedom. So they will never move back. They will never give up the fight. And you just bring one woman who can be a leader, and then you see what we do." And then he said, "You call that doctor, that lady doctor, to meet me." So Lakshmi came at night, and of course she was very excited, and she immediately said, "Yes, I'm willing to take up this work." And Netaji said, "Well, when you start?" So she said, "I am ready to start tomorrow. I will go and lock up my clinic and I will start work." And then the work of recruiting started. And you'll be surprised to know that thousands and thousands of young women, some of them ran away from their homes also, came to join the Rani of Jhansi regiment, as it was called. Of course, many of them could not be taken. But finally, 1,500 women were recruited, and they came from poor families. They were not, very strong, hefty women, but all of them learned to run with rifles, with big, heavy packs of 10 kilos on their backs through jungles,